Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Rotoworld Football Show, Tuesday, July 1st, 2025, 3 days short of our nation's 249th birthday. You don't hear people mentioning that one too often. We're only talking about 250. I think 249 is more important. I also think the southern divisions of the NFL are more important. It's a burning questions series. We're on to the South, Atlanta, Tampa Bay, New Orleans, Carolina. I guess that counts as the South. Houston, I guess that also counts as the South, even though it's Be Real, Texas is its own thing. Indianapolis, definitely not the South. Jacksonville, Tennessee, all the division, all the teams, all the burning questions. Can Michael Penix, what can he do in Atlanta? I don't know what I wrote. How high is Bucky Irving's ceiling? Can Alvin Kamara keep getting away with it at age 30? Can CJ Stroud bounce back? Things of that nature and so much more. All 8 teams. But first, we'd be remiss if we didn't mention there was actual news. The Dolphins are, as Kyle said, the Dolphins are operating as if this is the last thing you see before Darrell Bevell was announced as interim head coach. Rearranging deck chairs on some ship. They hope it's not the Titanic, but they've shipped out Jonnu Smith and Jalen Ramsey for Minkah Fitzpatrick. That was step 1. The very obvious step 2, then, if you ask anybody, you ask 10 football fans on the street, what should the Dolphins do after trading Jonnu Smith? It should be coaxing Darren Waller out of retirement, clearly. Something that was on everyone's radar, Denny. Darren Waller apparently still plays football. He's now on the Miami Dolphins. Jonnu Smith is not on the Miami Dolphins. Fallout for Jonnu. It's never been more over. We already know that. And fallout for Darren Waller. What's going on here?
Yeah, I do think that it is the natural step to just say, hey, Darren Waller, musician Darren Waller, stop making music, come play for us for 1 year and maybe $5 million. So, look, 33 years old, headed into his age 33 season. Waller struggled with all sorts of injuries, mostly like soft tissue kind, which is like way worse than any other kind, really, as far as fantasy goes. Throughout his career, he's 5 years removed from his career season for the Raiders, which was really good and really cool, but long time ago. Jonnu had 20% target share, 15% air yard share last year. I don't think that Waller is seeing that. But it gives the Dolphins something, because honestly, without Jonnu, their tight end depth chart was dust. I mean, there was nothing there. Right. So I guess this gives them something, but really is there any chance that Darren Waller stays healthy and upright this year? I feel like there's a 0.0 chance.
Yeah, Darren Waller, Kyle, he was fine his last year in New York. Yeah. Also under duress, was not a good offense, was a really bad quarterback situation. The problem is he appeared in 12 games. That's a number he failed to clear in any of his final 3 seasons. 11 in 2021 for the Raiders, then 9 for the Raiders, 12 for the Giants. He retired. He got a year older in that time span. I guess the hope is that maybe he's refreshed and maybe his body just needed an extended rest, but not the age where a guy who is already missing time is typically going to get more healthy. What do you have to add or contradict what Denny just said about the situation?
I mean, to your point, he was still very functional on a completely dysfunctional Giants team where he was both banged up and playing for an awful team. He was 11th or better in ESPN's open score and yards per route run and PFF receiving grade. He was basically between 8 and 11, which is one of the good but not great tight ends. Not an elite fantasy asset, but certainly a tight end 1 for fantasy purposes on a if he could string this out to a per game basis on a real team. But the thing is, like he said, if we could just set a prior of guy is declining for every year, because his worst year in yards per route run after he started playing meaningful snaps. He played a handful of snaps with the Ravens early in his career, but after we actually start getting a sample size on him, his worst year by yards per route run was 2023. His second worst year was 2022. His third worst year was 2021. Yeah. He was a guy who was clearly in decline. His team that he broke out with, the Raiders, functionally gave up on him. I believe they technically traded him to the Giants, but if they thought
they gave up on him.
Especially if you send him to the Giants. If you send him off
That's
to
what I'm saying. Yeah, trade him to the Giants. They gave up.
Giants is different. Trading to the Giants is different than hey, go have a swan song season, return to Baltimore or whatever. If they had sent him to the Ravens. No, this is we're done with this. And he's, like I said, still functional with the Giants, but worse in back-to-back years. Stops playing football, pursues a music career. Now he comes back. I do think
several number 1 hits.
So many of them. Too many to count. So don't ask me, to be clear, because I can't. But guy who's just continually getting worse, even if he's not terrible. He was not at all terrible. He was still good, I'd say, even like good-ish. He kept getting hurt, which is part of the problem. But like still when he was on the field, good. But when that guy is getting a little worse every year, then retires, then switches teams again, our prior should be that this guy is not fantasy relevant. I think he could show up and be fantasy relevant. That's not a take I want to like bet on in redraft. And frankly, I think by the time this podcast comes out, he's probably even in best ball. People are getting overly excited for a player that he hasn't been in years. So like I'm open to being wrong, but I'm betting not at the prices we'll have to pay within 24 hours.
What feels right? Tight end 19? Is that too bullish?
I go even lower. I'm probably closer to that like tight end, like late 20s, like 24, 25. Like I could totally see him finishing as like the tight end 10 because like tight end 10 is just a high bar to clear. Like, you know, total Jags get to tight end 10 and he could still be a total Jag or more than that. But I think that's at that like top 20% of the range. And the sort of left tail of this is guy whose career arc looks like this 4 times out of 5 is just nothing.
Tight end 19 over under, Denny.
Under. But I will say, you know, Tua may have the last laugh here and say, you don't think Darren Waller is going to be my guy, my check down guy this season? Well, watch this.
Waller's not much of a check down guy, though. His whole thing in his career was he's like big wide receiver, essentially. He's the seam stretching tight end. He was never much of a yak producer. It was the fact that he played like large slot, but he could push the chains. And like, that's not what Jonnu did. Jonnu was like, I will sit under in the zone. And when Tua quickly read, nope, let's find Jonnu. That's not really like they played a similar sort of lineup alignment situation where they both are playing like roughly half of their snaps out of the slot. And then they weren't even playing all the time in line outside of that. It was like a quarter of them were coming as a true wide receiver, but stylistically they almost couldn't be more opposite, where Jonnu is that like ball, like rolling ball of butcher knives, get the ball in his hands and go. And then Waller's the opposite, where he's like seam stretching downfield, but you're not afraid of him as a yak merchant. So he doesn't like fill the same role in the style at which they play, which is like another concern that he comes in. And if they want him to fill the Jonnu role, I don't know if he does that in terms of like the actual plays they're designing for Jonnu don't translate to him as much.
Yeah, let me be clear. We're talking about 3 yards in a cloud of dust for Darren Waller. So he's not catching it and running. Of course not.
Real quick, I think the easy way to sum up the Jonnu to the Steelers is it's never been more over, because it has never been more over.
Yeah, I mean, it'll be cool. Like the film folks, they're gonna love it. They're gonna love it.
That's true,
right?
Yeah.
They're
gonna concepts with art.
This concept, I haven't seen this concept since the Titans in 2019, and they have Jonnu in the backfield for 37 snaps in one game, and he, of course, he didn't see the ball, but you know,
Jonnu had like a 60-yard carry or like a 50-yard carry with the Titans, and it sold me, and obviously it sold the Patriots for like 4 years, and it basically never worked. right. So that's going to be cool, but like, I don't see it working. Also, like, is Freiermuth just not going to be a thing anymore? I mean, I guess they're going to use 2 tight ends. What, 3 tight end sets with Darnell Washington? Is that what we're doing here?
12 personnel is going to be a feature where they gave up on trying to find a number 2 receiver. So they found a number 2 tight end. Jonnu and Pat Freiermuth do essentially play different positions. Third Jonnu, tour of duty with Arthur Smith. I guess maybe there's something there, but
right.
I mean, Kylie's outside the top 12 now, correct? At tight end.
Yeah, by a country mile. Like, I think in the right offense, this type of player could actually succeed, where he's just like de facto slot receiver. I mean, he was useful. He got, I think, almost like 600 yards, which I guess for a tight end is still kind of useful when he played this exact role, or what I think will be this exact role in Atlanta. He's playing behind Kyle Pitts, ran like 60 to 70% of the routes, which isn't like a death knell for a tight end, but on the low volume context and probably not that efficient passing context of any Arthur Smith offense back then, it was probably Desmond Ridder at that time, and now it'll be Aaron Rodgers. The combination of not a full route tree, not a particularly efficient offense, and a slow run-first offense, that's what makes me not too excited about Jonnu. Like, if you put this guy, like, saw like Noah Gray pop off for a few weeks in the tight end 2, we need you to do something role, or it happens with Isaiah Likely. Like, once a month, it's hard to predict, but it is fun when it happens. But, like, put those types of players on the lowest passing volume offense in the league, and it's just not a bet worth making in redraft. I think in the best ball context, his ADP just needs to fall like a stone before I ever become interested. Maybe it gets there, but I frankly don't think we'll react hard enough to how bad of a spot this is.
We'll say they're not going to use him the same way as the Dolphins did. We take that for granted. What we maybe should take for granted is that they also should not do that anyway, and that it maybe wasn't even really that smart for Jonnu Smith to be getting 8 to 12 targets every week for the Miami
Yeah.
Dolphins.
Just one last thing on Jonnu. On the one hand, his offensive coordinator is totally obsessed with him. Like, he just will not stop pursuing him, which you would think, okay, well, that can't be a bad thing for like his fantasy value, like his target prospects, right? But then, you look back at Jonnu's season in Atlanta, and I know Kyle Pitts was there and everything, but he was only targeted on 18% of his routes. So it's not like they were it's not like Arthur Smith was jamming him the football. He wasn't. Like, he was just there.
I'd say 18% is somewhat high for Jonnu Smith.
And not 18% target share, but per route.
No, I know.
And he doesn't run all the routes. So
right.
Like, if you're going to be a low routes guy, you have to be a per route phenom, and he was neither of those.
I looked it up, and I'm thinking, just the whole Arthur Smith obsession thing. I'm thinking it's going to be 28%, 30%. It's 18. So I don't know.
Speaking of Atlanta, it's in the American South. It's in the NFC South. It's in our burning question series, because we're now here to talk about the NFC South, the AFC South. We start in the NFC. Two of the lower wattage divisions in the entire NFL, Denny Carter, but we have one of the brightest burning questions in the entire league is in Atlanta. Just what can Michael Penix do? What are realistic expectations for him as finally a first-year full-time starter? Could the fallout be for the Falcons offense? The cup of coffee last year was not disastrous. It wasn't overly promising either, but it was under not great circumstances. Just what are realistic expectations for Michael Penix, who is not going gangbusters from an ADP perspective, struggling to get into the top 20 at quarterback?
I mean, the thing with Penix is that, you're not reaching for him in a fantasy sense because he's just a distributor who doesn't run much. I think, what he means for Drake London in particular is more important than, his own fantasy prospects. London was targeted on almost 40% of his routes when Penix was under center last year. The one thing that stuck out to me in looking at the Penix starts from late last season was that Atlanta was 29th in pass rate over expected over that stretch. Really conservative on early downs, which I think speaks to maybe trying to ease in the rookie, especially in that tough situation with Kirk Cousins late in the season. So maybe that eases up a little bit and they're a little more pass heavy. But I would say that the Falcons are locked in to be like, I don't know, bottom 10 or 12 in pass rate over expected. So I'm not sure who else is going to get there for the Falcons beyond London.
Do you really think they're locked into bottom 10 or 12 pass rate over expected, Kyle, where there's really 3 survival mode starts? Not only you're making your first starts, but they're critical games. Not surprising that the MO was don't make mistakes, don't lose the game. But do you think that is what we're going to see this year, or is it maybe something more to slinging it all around the yard at the University of Washington, Michael Penix?
Yeah, I'm probably closer to Denny. Like, if you set the line at 10 or 12 would be like 20 and a half. Do they rank better or worse than 20th and a half in pass rate over expected? I think I would take the under, because it wasn't just the Penix starts too. Again, even Kirk Cousins, they were like in survival mode, in hide the, cannot play football anymore quarterback situation. But they were a -7% pass rate over expected team with Kirk Cousins under center. And they got even a little more, just a touch more conservative, to -8% in those games Denny mentioned. And we've seen this with a lot of the like Shanahan, McVay tree guys, is they're not like air raid guys. They're just really
especially
good at
the McVay
football.
tree, which this
right?
is the
Yeah.
McVay tree.
Yeah, they're not like necessarily air raid guys. They're just really good at passing the football. I don't think they're particularly run first guys. I don't think this is a team they were 29th last year in pass rate over expected. I would take the over on that. Like, I do think they finished better than bottom 2 or 3. They look a little less like the Packers and Eagles this coming year. But this does strike me as a team that wants to play balanced. You really have to force them to play fun football. We had 2 Michael Penix games, I believe his back-to-back games to end the year, were both shootout overtime games. I think it was either the Panthers or the Bucs. It was divisional NFC South game, and then a really fun game with the Commanders. Penix didn't get over 40 pass attempts in either of those games. Like, these were supposedly high pass volume environments in which they still, relative to the environment, really tightened up, really weren't that interested in trying to play these fun shootouts, even as their opponents dragged them into it. So I do think they're a balanced at best kind of team. And I think That's not great for passing volume, but it's awesome for Michael Penix that in terms of passing volume that he doesn't run, but he's not a huge sack taker either. Like he is the perfect distributor in terms of his dropbacks turned last year is about 92% of his dropbacks turned into pass attempts. And for a guy like Justin Fields, like you could lose like 10, 20% off of that, where he is just sack taking and scrambling like you wouldn't believe. The scrambling's awesome, but the sack taking kills you. And both of them don't turn into targeted pass attempts. So for the pass catchers, I think, and they actually played an extremely fast pace too. They're like weirdly balanced, but extremely fast. So for the pass catchers, even if you're balanced, so many of your dropbacks turn to pass attempts and your team plays at a super fast pace. It's hard to say what like the neutral script even was in the 3 Penix starts, but in the 3 Penix starts, if you just look at the plays that were relatively neutral script, they were the fastest team in the NFL. So even if they're not a high-flying passing attack on like this is what a game should look like in terms of passing, they will just purely run a ton of plays. So I do feel really good about a guy like Drake London. I think he rounds out the tier of wide receivers. The Ladd McConkey, A.J. Brown, Drake London, you're kind of starting to put Rashee Rice in there as well. There is a cliff that happens right after those guys where I could see any of those guys being the top 2 or 3 fantasy receiver, and I could not see the next guy being that.
You only mentioned Drake London. That's pretty much all fantasy drafters are mentioning in best ball leagues this summer beyond because Darnell Mooney, wide receiver 47, Denny, Kyle Pitts, tight end 18. They're drafting it as if it's a 2-man offense with Bijan Robinson and Drake London. Is that a mistake or is that right? Are we only counting on Michael Penix, pass first quarterback, only supporting one weapon?
Yeah, I guess assuming that they're going to be run heavy again this year might be a mistake if it makes you ignore guys like Mooney and even like Kyle Pitts who maybe could get there on volume. I think that Kyle's point about play volume is interesting, and that could kind of counteract what we're talking about here. Mooney, here's what Mooney strikes me as: a guy who you are just so happy to get him in a 14-team league. Like you're thrilled to be able to plug.
Oh my God, another 7th place finish. I am loving it.
No,
God, they're not going to laugh me out of the room again.
And at least you have a chance for a 20-point outing from your second flex in a 14-team league. But honestly, like consistency wise, I don't see it happening for a guy like that.
Mooney last year by average PPR points was the please load. Was the
this is good
tight end. Okay. Oh no, I was on quarterbacks, not receivers. He was the wide receiver 39. That's without filtering out injured guys. So he's more like the wide receiver 33, 32. And he's going as the 47. Behind guys he's going to easily outpoint like Stephon Diggs, who's done, Jaden Reed, Matthew Golden, probably even Deebo Samuel, maybe even my guy Jerry Jeudy. I think Darnell Mooney's ADP should rise up.
Wait,
Kyle, one ADP. Mooney. His ADP is like this because there's no ceiling, but people just ignore the floor.
This is the goated Tyler Lockett outscores his ADP every year. Like,
no,
don't
it
care,
is.
frankly.
It really is. He is that guy.
I do agree that
but
if you set his like wide receiver
Judy,
X line, if you set his wide receiver X line at like 47.5, which is what he's going as right now, I guess I would take the under. It just frankly does not matter in the slightest to me that he's going to finish as the wide receiver 38 and he was drafted as the wide receiver 47.
It does matter on the margins. It's the kind of thing, it definitely matters in robotic best ball drafting where you're drafting 120 teams. And
I don't have zero. Wow. Yeah, I don't. He's not a player I have zero because I agree. Like he is a fine small win player, but like
a small win guy.
Yeah, I don't take that guy very often, but you're right. There are contexts in which like, oh, you get an awesome start of like Jahmyr Gibbs and Devon Achane or whatever. Like, you got to start finding points. You got to find
stunningly little target competition with the quarterback. At Washington, he was a 45 attempts guy, Michael Penix.
Wait a second though. You just jumped off the Jerry Jeudy bandwagon after riding it hard for a year for Mooney.
Well, you just Google Brown's quarterback depth chart once, and that.
Yeah, he has Flacco. What else do you want?
I was gonna say you should have Googled it jlast year. It was terrible, and I'm not a Jeudy guy, but like
Jeudy carried me almost to championships.
Yeah, I know. So. Stick with him. Don't.
Yeah, Jeudy got to like 1,200 yards. He'll easily outscore him. I think for the archetype that Mooney is, like I'd probably just try and get the cheapest version of that guy possible. You can get
it's Mooney. Mooney's already the cheapest version of that.
It's Adam Thielen. Like it's Adam Thielen, or it's Michael Pittman, who goes shortly after him.
Pittman has a case. Thielen doesn't have a case. But Pittman does have a case.
I cannot believe that our Zoomer in residence is talking about Adam Thielen in this way.
Yeah, we got it.
Okay, when it's compared to Darnell Mooney, I'm allowed to do this. If we were like doing Emeka Egbuka or whatever.
I mean, Kyle was trying to kick me off the podcast last year every time I even uttered the words Adam Thielen. So I appreciate it.
No, last year I returned to form on Adam Thielen. It was 2 years ago where he just beat the brakes off me. I lost so bad.
The Tampa Bay Buccaneers are somehow maybe the best team in the American South of the 8 clubs we'll be talking about today. Keep making the playoffs with Baker Mayfield. Keep playing pass-first offense, Kyle Dvorchak. They've added another first-round receiver in Emeka Egbuka. But Bucky Irving's the most exciting guy to have in fantasy. He's the one we want. He's the one, as a rookie, over 200 rush attempts, caught almost 50 passes, handled real big workloads in the biggest games of the year for the Bucs. Honestly, began to look like a fantasy superstar. He's the RB9 by ADP right now. I mean, how high is his ceiling? Does he have is there like a 2 or 3% chance outcome where he's the RB1 overall? Just how high is Bucky Irving's ceiling? Rachaad White, contract year, he is still there.
Yeah, I mean, I think you put it well. Like, we should not expect even that often at all that he becomes like the RB1 overall. But like, you can pitch me on the case. My ears are perked up to the case. You look at what he did last year as a runner in the past, I think 10 or 15 years. I think it's like 15 plus because guys used to just get a ton of work and not be that efficient. In the past 10 or 15 years, players with more than 200 carries and more than 4 yards after contact per carry, Nick Chubb, Derrick Henry twice on that list. Nick Chubb came close a bunch of other times too. And of course, Bucky Irving did it last year. That's the end of the entire list. Of course, he didn't this was Derrick Henry did it with like 340 carries, right? And like Nick Chubb got like 290 or something. But still, there is no one else on that list in terms of as efficient yards after contact with as much volume, 200. He got to 207, if I remember correctly. It's just Nick Chubb double dipping Derrick Henry and Bucky Irving. He also did it, like you said, with just shy of 50 catches and 1.6 yards per route run. And the big question for him last year, going into last year, was like, frankly, he's not a great athlete. He does not look like a bell cow back. He looked like a really good pass catcher in college. He looked like an interesting, like, change of pace kind of guy. There's just no way a team gives this type of player their entire backfield. How does he close out the year? In the final 4 games, including their playoff game, he outcarries Rachaad White 70-10. Sean Tucker pitched in for 10 carries as well, but 70-20 for him versus all of his backups. Maybe the only qualm you could have with that sort of split, those final games, is that he didn't dominate the pass catching work. He ran under half of the routes, and he got 13 targets to Rachaad White's 11. But like I said, if there's anything we can feel confident in him doing, it's him growing that role as a pass catcher. I did not think he would come into the NFL and be a bell cow at any point, really at any point in his career, but let alone as a rookie. He did the high volume stuff, which is what I didn't think he could do by the end of his rookie season and in the most high leverage game of the Bucs season, the playoffs. Now he just needs to up that pass catching role from really good and efficient to great. And that's kind of the leap he needs to make to be a top 2, top 3 fantasy running back, maybe the RB1 overall. I can squint and don't even have to squint that hard, and I can see it.
We know that's not the most likely outcome, Denny, RB1 overall, or maybe even like within the range of outcomes, but he's the RB9. The RB8 is Jonathan Taylor, who again missed time with injury last year, appeared in 14 games, still finished 4th in rushing. Then Devin Achane at RB7, who has just settled in as an always controversial player. Let's take that. How do you like Bucky's odds of finishing ahead with the 2 guys in front of him, John Taylor and Devin Achane?
I like his odds. I like it because I recently read a profile on Bucky Irving and the Bucs in general, and they really like this guy. Like that, like they're in, and I think that matters. My numbers here on Bucky Irving are a little more zoomed out. Kyle mentioned the end of season domination that he had, and certainly that matters a lot. I actually went back to week 10, which I was when he started to sort of like slowly inch toward lead back status in the Tampa backfield. And from week 10 to week 18, Bucky Irving had 124 carries to only 74 carries for White. White logged more pass routes than Irving, but had a few fewer targets, had 3 fewer targets, because Irving was targeted on 23% of his routes over that stretch, which is pretty good. And just to throw this in here, as far as like production goes on as a pass catcher, Bucky Irving, 13 yards yak per reception last year, and over that 9-game stretch. I think he's pretty good. I think he's pretty good as a pass catcher, good enough so that maybe he just takes that role for himself, not 100%, but kind of phases Rachaad White out as nothing but like a contingency back for fantasy.
Yeah, the only reason I even put RB1 within the range of outcomes is I do feel like there's a chance he just totally dispatches Rachaad White to like Tyler Algier status, basically. Breather back. He can be relied on in any situation, any down. So he plays, but he's no longer a 1B. He's just a pure backup when Bucky's tired. I think that probably not the most likely outcome, but I think that is very plausible. And again, it's his contract year. They're moving on from Rachaad White.
Yeah.
He's a valuable player to have on the roster for a contending team. But I get to see Bucky Irving seizing like way more of the work than we expect. And we already expect him to seize a lot of the work. We expect Alvin Kamara to probably keep getting away with it. But we're going to talk about that right after this. Since there really isn't an offseason in the NFL, stay dialed in with us in the NBC Sports Now channel. Join Dan Patrick, Mike Florio, Chris Sims, and Matthew Berry, and us from the Rotoworld Football Show for more insight on the biggest news and stories around the league. For more details, visit NBCSports.com/now. Having trouble talking today. I think it's because I've already talked so much. I did a 2.5-hour podcast with our friend Matt Kelly, Fantasy Mansion, Roto Underworld player profiler. That'll be coming out. I don't know why I'm plugging it, but I shouldn't be plugging someone else's show, but I did go on it, and I'm plugging.
Well, the thing is, you're going to plug that show, and on that show, I assume you plugged this show, so it's like a reciprocal plugging situation.
It is. It's a reciprocal plugging situation. It's a keep getting away with it situation for Alvin Kamara, Denny. He always gets away with it. He's not 30 as of this taping. He will be 30 by week 1. 2 or 3 years in a row now he's been on. Surely he's going to stop getting away with it. Watch. And he gets away with it a little less each year, but he very much continues to get away with it in the larger picture. His roster spot is secure. He's not going to be a surprise cut in training camp. He's making too much money. Will Alvin Kamara continue to get away with it this year?
I mean, you would think no, but then, we're going to look back at this and say, oh, yes, of course he did. Because Kellen Moore, I would hope, would look into the spreadsheets a little bit and see that there's like no worse way to try to move the football than to check down to Alvin Kamara. And I have the numbers to prove it. Last year, his EPA per target, Kamara's EPA per target ranked 172nd out of 190 qualifying pass catchers over the past 3 seasons. Okay, this is zoomed out, folks. Over the past 3 seasons, he has the same EPA per target as Najee Harris. So what are we talking about? Like, this whole offense has been based on like Kamara checkdowns for years now, and no wonder they stink, right? It just doesn't work. So I feel like they don't have much choice, because who do they have? I mean, they have Olave when he's healthy. Who knows with the head stuff?
Shaheed when he's healthy, but who knows?
He's coming back from a blown out knee. Like, I feel like they're always, the Saints always gravitate toward, okay, we have no other option than to give Alvin Kamara 25 touches. And almost anybody can get there on that kind of volume.
I will say this, Kyle, the boomer stat for a running back, very boomer stat. You want a running back to average 8 yards per catch. That's usually the cutoff for what is a good yards per catch or not for running back. He was right at 8.0 last year. That's a number he hits almost every year. But again, 89 targets, turned them in only 543 yards. Do you agree or disagree with Denny? That first off, he's no longer good, and that second, he will continue getting away with it.
I still think he's good as a pass catcher in that, like, guys who go out and get the ball a lot, I think that makes them good. And I do think, to Denny's point, like, it's good in the context of targeting a running back. In the, like, zoomed out, what should an NFL team do? Absolutely not. Like, we make this joke about like Evan Ingram, and he actually does like move the chains sometimes and get first downs. And we're still saying with him, who's an actual like quote downfield pass catcher relative to Alvin Kamara, he is like, did we really need to push Evan Ingram to the single season receptions record, which I think he got second, and I think that's second most receptions for a tight end ever. He came just behind Zach Ertz a few years ago. Did we really need to get there? Do you think that was best for your offense? No. And in the context of like, should you target your running backs a lot? The answer is probably closer to no than it is yes. And I think that's true of Alvin Kamara. But in terms of the context of which running backs are good at catching passes, he was at 1.7, I believe, yards per route run last year. Like, he was still second in the NFL in yards per route run. Like you said, Patty was good in yards per catch. Like, he earns the ball a lot, and he's good and efficient per route basis. he's still a good pass catcher, and that's part of the appeal of the profiles. He's been that way forever. Even as his rushing numbers have kind of just fallen off the face of the earth. He's not the worst, like he's not a terrible running back, but he's total replacement level. He is outside the top 30 in yards after contact, in next gens, I believe both success rate and rush yards over expected. And he's been that way for a while. He's a replacement, maybe less than replacement level.
I think it's less. Yeah.
It might be less than replacement level between the tackles. And I mean, I saw Pat Grimace. Also, you could probably chalk that up somewhat to the situation. These Saints have been terrible for years. But let's just say,
the situation is why he probably will continue to get away with it, because rebuilding, it's an awful rookie quarterback. The cavalry did not arrive in the backfield. You have 6th rounder Devin Neal, the best ball drafters are trying to get excited about. That's the only touch competition at all. Like, this situation is designed for Alvin Kamara to just remain Alvin. I mean, he doesn't even have Taysom Hill anymore to battle for gadget touches.
That's a good point.
And not only, like you said, Pat, like they're locked into him this year, they're a pretty good bet to keep him next year as well. They take on a pretty good amount of dead money, even if they post 2-1 cut him next year, because this should be, the very obviously should be rebuilding Saints extended him, I believe, last October, like middle of the season. They gave him a 2-year extension.
Why?
So, I know. But like, not only are they not going to be like early in the year thinking like this is the guy's last year on the team, even at the end of the season, they're not thinking about like, we need to see who the next man up is. We need to be, we need to see what we have in Devin Neal. They probably don't need to see what they have in Devin Neal, at least for 2026.
No one needs to.
So, come on. Like you said, the fact that the situation is so bad has probably suppressed some of his stats in some capacity. It has also inflated so many of them in a way that's probably going to happen again this year. So I'm still not I say all this. I'm still not drafting a ton of him, but a mistake I made last year plenty of times was to be extremely confident in some bets that were awesome, in Bucky Irving, in Chase Brown, in Rico Dowdle. And all those guys, understandably, and I could have told you this, took like, 8 to 10 weeks to really pop off. My teams just drowned as they waited for the Chase Brown lifeboat to come through. And I could have used one Alvin Kamara. I don't want to be loading up on teams with like, I've got a James Conner, Alvin Kamara, Joe Mixon backfield. But like using one of those guys to get you across not even the finish line, like the midway point to where my fun bets can start hitting, Kamara makes sense as one of those bets.
Carolina Panthers, the final team in the NFC South. Denny, a team we've talked about a lot with Bryce Young already, and Tetero and McMillan. We've somehow even talked a lot about Adam Thielen, as we referenced earlier in the show. But the guy we haven't talked about at all is Chuba Hubbard. He's the RB16 in summer best ball drafts, kind of lacking competition in that backfield, because we know that Jonathan Brooks's career has been waylaid. Who's the new backup? I forget.
They brought in Rico.
Rico Dowdle, of course, pretty good backup. But Chuba every year outkicks his ADP. Every year kind of overachieves. What is there to say about RB16 Chuba Hubbard? Is he just the most RB16 who's RB ever 16'd? Or is there more to his game, falling back to earth this year? What do you think?
I think there's a little more juice to squeeze than just RB16. I think he could be, I don't know, he could be an RB1 in 12-team leagues.
Never mind. All right, Kyle, what do you think?
Wait a second. Wait, you're talking about a guy who is 6th in yards after contact per carry last year, right behind a guy named Derrick Henry. Ever heard of him? So Chuba Hubbard, Derrick Henry, is there a difference? Many are asking. No one quite has the answer.
To confirm.
Rico Dowdle stinks. Let's just be real. Okay.
Not my guy.
Real there. Yeah, that's actually highly incorrect. But yeah,
what? Are you guys kidding? Is this a joke? Did you guys plan this before?
No, the Cowboys offense became functional once they featured Rico Dowdle.
Wow. Okay.
Shocker. Guy who's like, we got to draft Zeke in every draft. Thinks Rico.
He's coming. Still fighting last year's war.
Wait a second. Wait. Before we get to that, he should benefit from the Bryce Assance, which is happening, of course.
Which is totally fake, but yeah.
It's not fake. And also, the team loves Chuba Hubbard.
They do.
Like,
they can't stop paying him.
Like they seriously, he gets a new contract like every 90 days.
He does.
Okay?
It's pretty excessive.
And it's a little much, but we're going to go with it. They want to base their entire franchise on Chuba Hubbard, and I respect it as a guy who drafts Chuba Hubbard quite a bit.
Piggybacking off Denny, contradicting Denny. What do you say, Kyle?
Yeah, I mean, as he's kind of inverse Alvin Kamara. As a pure runner, he was also in a relatively bad situation last year. he was just a baller. Like, he was so good. As Denny pointed out, he was really good in yards after contact. He was the number 1 running back in success rate. Like, he just doesn't take losses, and he gains more than he loses in terms of what we should expect. Very often, I believe he was also top 5 in rush yards over expected, about 1.2. Like, he looks like in basically every metric, somewhere between like the 10th, 3rd or 5th best runner. But I think the one thing that really has me concerned and kind of gives like the very obvious like running back dead zone red flag is he's just not a good pass catcher. He was 57th in the NFL in yards per route run last year at 0.5. Like, Rico was also a pretty replacement level pass catcher at 0.8. I think that's even enough that maybe he could steal some of that third down type of work. And we also saw during the Bryce Assance, we got another level of touchdown production. He basically doubled his touchdown production. From when Bryce came back, he averaged 0.9 touchdowns per game. It was either 7 out of 8 games, he scored 7 times in 8 games, or maybe it was 8 of 9. And before that, he was getting 0.4 touchdowns per game. So scoring in less than half of his games. And because he is like, well, he's really good on the ground, to be fair, but like a lot of his fantasy points were driven by volume and touchdowns and not pass catching work. If Bryce isn't what he was at the end of last year, it's like a catastrophic meltdown situation where he doesn't catch passes. He's not getting that goal line work because the team doesn't get him to the goal line. I'm tepidly, buying in on Bryce. Like, he was really good at the end of last year. He was a really good prospect. So I am generally buying in on it. But at these prices where you do have to pay that like mid-range RB2 and there's a risk of the bottom falling out, he's one of the running backs in the quote dead zone range, which I think is starting to like, we've priced it in enough that you can feel comfortable getting some of these guys. I think I would take like a Kamara or like a Ken Walker over him, where I just don't think that there's as much of the bottom falls out kind of floor, not in terms of talent. He's like one of the better backs that goes in this range, but his profile of scoring fantasy points is not fantasy friendly. It needs a lot of things to go in his direction.
I think I would take 6 of the 7 backs going directly behind him.
Who are they?
Over him. Kenneth Walker, I would take over him. Joe Mixon, I mean, you don't have to
I don't know if I do that one.
You don't have to like it, but I mean, Joe Mixon will catch 50 passes and score 12 touchdowns.
You might be right.
What he does every Alvin Kamara, probably still taking RJ Harvey over Chuba Hubbard, to be honest.
I'm a sucker. I'll totally do that. But
not taking Travion Henderson, and I'm probably taking James Conner and David Montgomery over Chuba. I frankly don't understand Chuba ADP.
That's
what
fair.
More of these is too one-dimensional, Denny.
Yeah, after hyping him up, all that is pretty fair.
I think he might be like the best runner of that range. I actually would say
he is somehow underrated as a pure runner,
right?
No, that's his whole thing, is being a pure runner.
But you're right, Kyle. Like, on film, that looks awesome. On my fantasy roster, not at all.
Yeah,
as long as the setup is good, that also works very well. Like Derrick Henry is the best runner in the NFL. He's like borderline useless as a pass catcher. He's had some good years where he breaks a few long ones, but for the most part, he doesn't contribute as a pass catcher. In the right setup, that kills. And they got a really good setup for him last year where they were efficient at passing the ball, but they didn't want to pass the ball a ton. So it lends perfectly to having an efficient ground game. I just worry that he's not going to be resilient to Bryce regressing, which could happen. Like, that is very possible still.
Chuba should simply become a Hall of Fame level runner instead of a very good runner. We are now onto the AFC South. I couldn't decide which division to put first, but the NFC South, I think there was more juice to squeeze. The AFC South, a lot of just not great teams, Denny, is evidenced by the fact that the Houston Texans have been able to win the division at 10-7 back-to-back years. That was in spite of just across the board statistical decision-making, play-making regression from CJ Stroud last year. Not an impressive year for someone who looked like a future superstar as a rookie. Can CJ Stroud bounce back from that disappointment? And what does a fantasy bounce back even look like for a guy who right now is struggling to crack the top 20? He's currently the QB 20, in fact.
I think a couple things happened last year. The Texans
PFF Bobby, let's just be real, all his fault, but yeah.
Yes, right. PFF Bobby, the offensive coordinator, just totally crapped the bed in trying to force Stroud to do things that he did not do as a rookie, and including a lot of dropping back from center. And he wasn't good in those situations. And I think it showed it. He got, far. I'm not going to bore you guys with the numbers. I have never done that, and I never will. But the Texans offensive line did not protect Stroud the way they did in 2023. And it showed. Stroud's accuracy on intermediate throws just plummeted. It just went through the floor last year. I think that has something to do with being a little jumpy, and getting rid of the ball maybe a little early, maybe not having a lot of confidence in his blockers. So if they can clean that up, I think that he can get back to his rookie year form. I don't think it's that big of a leap, honestly.
What do you think? I mean, QB 20 is a very disappointing ADP, but I can't say I could argue with it. Last year, that was really the biggest concern was the jumpiness. Just like the guy who was expecting to get hit, it was because he was getting hit so much.
Yeah.
It was a terrible offensive line. PFF Bobby, maybe events overcame him. Maybe there's nothing he could do. He never figured out how to make life easier for CJ Stroud. He is gone. I mean, what do you think the bounce back looks like? Is the bounce back happening?
Yeah, I mean, I think the bounce back clearly has to look like a better short and intermediate and specifically quick passing game. This was a team last year where CJ Stroud faced the second highest rate of unblocked pressures, like guys just barreling right down at him. They were above average in the bad way in terms of quick pressures and overall pressure rate. He faced the sixth highest pressure rate among all quarterbacks. And that translated to the fifth most total pressure dropbacks in the regular season, including the postseason. He had leading the NFL in pressure dropbacks, and they were 25th in quick passing rate. These like basically when you think of last year, what we saw from both the Dolphins in terms of they had to do this, they had no other choice. And you guys always give Mike crap for not being adaptable, but he did it last year. Was like, we have the worst offensive line in the NFL and the most fragile quarterback. 2 seconds or less, every single pass is coming out. And that both speaks to the limitations of the offense and maybe still some lack of creativity in terms of the offensive play design, but he just did not have many choices. And he found the best possible way out. Bobby Slowick was just like, nope, we're still just doing under center 3 5-step drops and sacks for a lot of them is what just that turns out to be. So I think it has to be a better and more well-designed quick passing game. The weird thing is I don't know exactly who that goes through because that's not really Nico Collins' game, right? When you look at how quickly he's getting targeted, it's not exactly what he does. Even Christian Kirk, who's probably the starting slot receiver, he's not like Pat, you talked about before, he like doesn't exactly fit the mold of a slot, but he's not outside wide receiver size, so it's not clear exactly what kind of role he's played. And I think that's the reason he hasn't like hit the next gear in the NFL. He's been a good NFL player, but maybe it could have been great if they just like figured out what to do with him more. So I think it's weirdly, I'm not sure who that ends up being. I hope it's Jalen Noel, the 3rd round rookie, the second Iowa State receiver they drafted, because he's just like lightning in a bottle with the ball in his hands. That's what his specialty should be. I hope we see him on the field, even if it's just a part-time role for plays where they know they could be getting pressured quickly, to go out, get the ball in his hands, let him do damage, and let him make CJ Stroud's life easy, because they just don't have another player who exactly profiles as that. The other rookie, Jaden Higgins, was kind of like a Nico Collins clone. So I hope they find the personnel. I think they have the personnel to do it. Just I hope they actually use that guy, because that guy right now is kind of 4th on the depth chart.
I'd say CJ Stroud strikes me as someone who could have a pretty convincing real-life bounce back that just doesn't then translate to the requisite fantasy points. It's kind of for all the reasons you guys laid out, and more like it's just an in-transition skill core. Also, I mean, Nico Collins, the one all-pro they do have, starting to have a more concerning history of soft tissue injuries. So you don't even really know if you can count on 17 games from Nico Collins. So I just agree with the fantasy fade of Stroud. He's 1 spot behind Trevor Lawrence, 2 behind JJ McCarthy. I can't really say I agree with that. But
yeah,
I agree with the general bearishness, Denny.
Yeah, the rushing that we saw as a rookie, it remained in 2024, but it was a lot less successful. If you look at something called success rate, which as a rookie, 55% success rate on rush is really good. 38% in the second year, which is less good than 55%.
Only has 400 career rushing yards. I don't think he's taking another.
Yeah,
he was never that guy in college too. He fits that Penix.
He's a great athlete, as Denny
he's a great
was
athlete. Yeah,
out, but yeah, I just don't think the next step is coming as a rookie.
I don't. I think that you probably shouldn't be drafting him in 12-team leagues, and certainly
it's sad, but you shouldn't.
Folks shouldn't be drafting backup quarterbacks in 12-team leagues in a 1-quarterback league. No.
A home league. Oh yeah, I really need this 9th receiver when I'm playing against my cubicle mates. I mean, come on, you need a second quarterback.
I'm with Denny.
Matchups. Yeah,
absolutely not. Thankfully, Maryland has a law against that, so you can't do it anyway. But
we'll be right back. Good time to take a break as I besmirch cubicles. We'll be right back after this. 184 riders face 21 stages of brutal climbs and unmatched speed. Stream every stage of the Tour de France on Peacock. Beginning Saturday, of course, at 8 a.m. Eastern. Also going to be on NBC. I'm assuming also on some USA. But Tour de France, I love to have it on in the background. I love to keep the Indianapolis Colts in the background, too, because I don't care about them They're going down in flames this year. I mean, when you're way out at quarterback as Daniel Jones, like it's over before it's even begun.
Jeez.
And like, yeah, great. He's better passer than Anthony Richardson. Now let's compare him to, quote, every other passer. And it's over before it even begins in Indianapolis, Kyle. But we don't even care about that. We only care about Josh Downs. Does Josh Downs, wide receiver 46, I believe Michael Pittman's the wide receiver 50. Does Josh Downs finally overtake Michael Pittman? Pittman, who literally played through a broken back last year, is a bounce back candidate. He's never looked as good as Josh Downs to me, though. Does this actually happen this year, Kyle, or is it just forever going to be Pittman's season?
I mean, maybe it's like most likely that it doesn't happen for Downs because like the number 2 takes over probably is not most likely to happen anywhere. Like there's a reason we have, think one of these guys is the number 1. But when it happens, Josh Downs is like an absolute smash. Last year, he was 2.2 yards per route run. He was targeted on 28% of his routes. That's pushing like Rashee Rice, Puka Nacua territory. Part of that is because he doesn't run entirely all the routes. He's primarily a slot player. We did occasionally see him work beyond just the short and intermediate stuff. Like I don't think he's a slot only in the way that like Rondale Moore and Wan'Dale Robinson have been. Like he can work a little bit more intermediate and deep. He's a good yak producer. If I was a coach looking at this team and trying to figure out what's the most efficient way to run my offense, it would be the 2.2 yards per route run, dynamic with the ball in his hands. RotoPat thinks he's Antonio Brown 2.0
you
player.
Agreed with that too.
I do agree. I love it. I of course, I'm a down sucker. So like you could say something fairly outlandish, like maybe the best receiver of the 2010s is his comp. And I'm like,
he said poor man's to be clear.
Yeah. Light, L-I-T, light. He's Antonio Brown light. But like, if you look at what a breakout looks like, it's guys who are super efficient earlier in their career. And at the price, like we just need them to get the ball more, specifically get on the field more, essentially. This is the type of bet that when it wins big. So I do think for fantasy purposes, we should be betting on the Josh Downs takeover. I don't even hate the Michael Pittman price. Like he's a sub 2 career yards per route run guy, but he's actually a good targets per route run player. Last year in a down year, it was target on 22% of his routes. Not elite, but like that's why I was making a comparison between Darnell Mooney. I knew we were coming up on Pittman. If I want to bank on a guy to be like a fringe 1,000-yard receiver at the price, I'll just take the discounted Michael Pittman. I mean, like I said, I think you can push it all the way down to Thielen, but like I think Michael Pittman is that good balance. He's probably still a decent bet, especially like if we get more clarity on the quarterback situation. If we get to week 1, there's like we love Daniel Jones and the shoulder still isn't good for Ant, right? If we can project something closer to like 13 or 14 Daniel Jones starts, he can distribute. It's not going to be fun, but like he can distribute to those short and intermediate throws. I think both of these receivers right now are still decent bets. Downs is a pretty good bet, honestly.
There's just so much target competition in Indianapolis. It's a deep and varied receiver core with now a first-round tight end. I feel like that's the difference between Pittman and Darnell Mooney, where it's just a barren skill core in Atlanta. Denny, anything to add on Downs versus Pittman in the – again, Alec Pierce exists, Adonai Mitchell exists, Tyler Warren exists.
Well, Mitchell and Pierce used to exist, but with Daniel Jones under center, they no longer exist. He just, I mean, we all remember the Giants coaches, everybody with the Giants, owners, kitchen staff, everybody begging Daniel Jones, please, Daniel, throw the ball downfield. And he said, no, I'd rather not. The good thing is for Pittman and for Downs and maybe for Warren here, over the past 2 seasons, Daniel Jones ranks in the top 10 in accuracy on throws between 1 and 10 yards. So my guy can fling it from 1 to 10 yards. Don't even question that part of his game. Spin
it.
I mean, just he's Montana in that way. So that should be good for both of the receivers. I actually think Pittman at wide receiver 50 is very, very undervalued.
It's pretty egregiously low. I think both Pittman and Mooney are like egregiously low ADPs. I hate to admit it with Pittman. Just to put a bow on the Daniel Jones stuff, his last good year, 2022, he finished 14th in attempts, 472. That's despite missing a game. 14th in overall attempts. He had 33 quarterbacks attempt more passes of 20-plus yards than him. Mm-hmm. So it's not just a meme. It's not just a narrative. No. He refuses to throw deep. He will never throw deep. That's very unfortunate. Alec Pierce, who had over 800 yards and under 40 receptions last year, it's just not happening for Alec. I wish Alec Pierce could get traded to the Chiefs or the Bills.
It'd be so fun.
So bad. It'd be so fun. Jacksonville Jaguars, they're not fun. We've talked a lot about Travis Hunter. We've talked a lot about Brian Thomas Jr. I guess Denny's throwing his hat in the ring first for this one then. We're not talking about the pass catchers, though. We are talking about the far less fun backfield, I would say. We're just, how does it shake out? Well, they're basically telegraphing it. They want Travis Etienne to be more of a third down back this year. That was the role we thought Travis Etienne was kind of being drafted for, to be like a deluxe third down playmaking weapon. Career didn't really work out that way. How does his backfield shake out? If he's got more of that role, Tank Bigsby is more of the primary early down back. Bashal Tootin, I don't know what he's good at. Tell me about the Jags back.
Yeah, the best ball bros seem to like Tootin. I like Bigsby. I don't know what's wrong with Bigsby. Is it not cool to like Bigsby anymore? Anyway,
but he's not. He's actually Bigsby was decidedly proved himself not terrible last year. It's just, what is the upside with that profile? I guess I would say in fantasy.
What is the upside with a guy who just rips off like a 60-yarder every other game? I don't know. I mean, it could be worse. Look, Etienne's bad. The Jaguars know that. They're putting on a brave face, which I give them credit for. I don't know what you're talking about. Like our whole team is based on Travis Etienne. After he posted some of the worst running back metrics in living memory last year. Okay,
wow.
I'm talking like Ezekiel Elliott level metrics, not the good kind, the bad kind. And so I have a really hard time like buying that from the Jags, from the head coach and whose name escapes me at the moment.
Gladstone. Or that's the GM, because I already had an anecdote about that. Liam Cohen.
Yeah, no, but and so I reject that. I like Bigsby. I like taking Bigsby in best ball drafts. I know folks are in on Tootin though. Am I wrong here, Kyle, on Bigsby over Tootin?
You're dead wrong.
I mean, in your opinion, or I was gonna say, is your opinion wrong, or is your take on what the best ball folks are doing wrong?
No. Is my take wrong? You're saying yes.
Your take is wrong, clearly, but no, I agree with the. I just can't do it with Etienne, as you said. He's just been dysfunctional for 2 years. He was only good at it wasn't technically his rookie years, his first year of playing towards ACL, if I remember correctly, but he's just been a sub replacement level back. And even this role they talk about for him as like potentially a third down back, which sort of makes sense to transition a guy who hasn't really found his stride as a runner, transition him to a more of like a utility type of back, like do the dirty work of pass pro and third downs, while we have the young guys like Tank Bigsby. Talk about dysfunctional, cannot play a single passing down snap, no good at that. Don't let him do it. He's tipping passes for interceptions more than he's catching the freaking passes. And Bashal Tootin is like the fun, exciting, but probably still needs to be a bit seasoned in the NFL before he can play that 3-down role. I get why that would lead you to say Travis Etienne as a coach should be the third down guy. Like, he sucks at that too. Past 3 years, his ranks in yards per route run, 37th, 22nd, and 30th. His ranks per PFF as a pass blocker, 32nd, 37th, 58th last year. Like, it's just not that good at it. And it's one of these things where, like, I do think maybe for both of those, but especially for pass blocking, you should probably look a little more at how the team deploys their guys than what PFF grades them. Because at the end of the day, like, the team does have pretty good info on especially something more ephemeral like pass blocking, but they weren't leaning on him hard in that. He was only 28th in pass blocking reps last year. And of course, he allowed the second most pressures, 28th in reps, second in pressures allowed, in the bad way. Lots of pressures allowed. Only ran 46% of the routes last year. He just doesn't have like much of a useful skill set. And especially this is why I said Gladstone earlier. James Gladstone specifically said when he interviewed for the job of GM, he was talking about examples of players they would consider drafting, brought up Tootin as that like explosive, could potentially be the Bucky Irving kind of guy. And he's a good pass catcher. So like, to me, the most fun upside bet, even at price, is Bashal Tootin. I get queasy when I think about Travis Etienne, and I'm kind of right in the middle on Tank Bigsby. I do think he's a good runner, but it's such a weak bet where if he doesn't get a good chunk of the rushing work, one, he's just completely unplayable in redraft because his profile is so much based on like the one long run, and it might only come once every 3 or 4 weeks. But if he just doesn't hit them at such a high clip, he's like a 10 carry, needs a long run once every 2 months kind of guy. So it's a tricky bet to make. I actually do think he's good, though. I admit he's actually like a good runner.
For all the reasons you guys just laid out, I would not be surprised if Travis Etienne still ends up traded, despite their insistence that they're not going to trade him and that they missed the prime trading window for a player like that. I could see him being a training camp trade candidate. We end with the Tennessee Titans. We're going to give the Titans the short shrift, as always. We go quickly on the Tennessee Titans. That's a Rotoworld football show policy, Denny. But no one Cam Ward is the most exciting number 1 overall pick that no one ever talks about. Who benefits the most from Cam Ward's insertion under center, and why is it wide receiver 31 Calvin Ridley? Matt Kelly actually kind of talked me into this today.
Yeah, I mean, you guys know I've for some reason I've talked about Calvin Ridley incessantly over the past 2 months. I'm in. I like his profile. I think Cam Ward is a dog, and I think Cam Ward is going to force feed the football to Calvin Ridley. I think, just from an analytical standpoint,
Wow, first time ever.
Cam Ward brings an edge to this team that it sorely lacks. Okay. This team was the goofiest, most non-threatening team I've ever seen last year.
Correct.
With Will Levis under center.
Mm-hmm.
You change it all. I mean, you just shift 180 degrees to Cam Ward getting in front of cameras and like cursing like a sailor constantly, barking, literally barking at reporters and being like, "That's just me. Like, you're gonna have to deal with it. I don't lose. Just so everyone knows, I don't lose." And so this guy's coming in. You're telling me nothing's going to change? Everything changes, including my guy Chuba Hubbard, tight end 1 overall.
I was really hoping you were going to mention Chig. Yeah, Kyle, I have been talked into wide receiver 30. It might work for us, Calvin Ridley. I'll say with Cal, as I call him, I quite frequently forget he has back-to-back 1,000-yard seasons. It's 1,017 yards both times, but I don't know. Who benefits the most? Is it Cal? We know it's not Chig.
We know it's not Chig. We did this months ago. We did this months ago, and we laughed you off the screen with Chig. And then I went back and I was like, he's probably fine. Especially I have Cam Ward on my best ball team. I should take Chig again. Then I went and looked at numbers again, and I was like, he's Isaiah Likely, but imagine if there was nothing standing Isaiah Likely's way, and he still couldn't surpass what Isaiah Likely is. That's the problem. Last year he had the identical route rate, identical targets per route run, and identical target share to Isaiah Likely. Isaiah Likely plays behind Mark Andrews. No one plays ahead of Chig. He's also they don't target in the red zone, and he's dreadful against man. I think those are the reasons that he does not ascend to be on Isaiah Likely, is that he's never in his career, both dating back to college and now, beaten man coverage. He's just a very limited player. They don't use him in the red zone. He had fewer red zone targets than Josh Wiley and I believe Nick Bennett last year. It's the 20th round, sure, take Chig, but I struggle to see how he pays off more than a 19th round ADP.
What about when you throw out his bad games? Have you done that? Because if you throw out his bad games, he looks quite good.
I will say this with the Titans, we don't know who it's going to be. Someone else is going to have fantasy value on the Titans. If Cam Ward is even remotely good, because you have wide receiver 31, Calvin Ridley, you have tight end 26, Chig Okonkwo, then you have wide receiver 84. Tyler Lockett. That's how far you have to go for the next skilled player. Wow. And you have Alec Ayumaner, the wide receiver 88, wide receiver 117, Xavier Restrepo, who could be a fantasy dark horse, but someone's turning those, and someone's vastly outproducing one of those ADPs.
I'll push my chips on an Ayumaner. He fits the high level analytical stuff. I believe he was an third year early declare, back-to-back, I believe 30% dominator ratings, which is a true breakout. He's controlling the offenses running through him essentially, relatively, not incredibly efficient, but in terms of this was a really bad offense, he was at least commanding all of their work and not terribly inefficient. The one big red flag is he is purely contested catch guy. He does not earn a lot of separation. He tested really well at the combine. He doesn't really play to that kind of size speed combo. He more so just plays to the size aspect of his size speed. But if anyone's going to go out there and be my big wide receiver's down there somewhere, it does seem like Cam Ward has that stylistic fit of I'm going to let my guy make the play. Right. And in college, that's what Alec Ayumaner did. He didn't earn enough separation. And I think that will be a limiting factor for him in the NFL. But what'd you say? He was wide receiver 42 trillion. Yeah, I can see how he 88. I can see how he pays off just a few. The team is starting to gel. He's starting to get more routes midway through the year with a few splash plays that make 3-4 usable games in the final month or two. He's my bet because it's not going to be Tyler Lockett. It's not going to be a UDFA and Xavier Restrepo. I'm not.
It's going to be, by the way, tight end 52 Gunnar Helm could easily outpoint tight end 26 Chig Okonkwo.
It's not impossible.
I mean, you guys are just being mean-spirited at this point. The Restrepo thing, I'm just saying, here's what we know. We know we're going to have 7 blurbs during training camp where Restrepo is tearing up training camp, and it's one of them's going to be Restrepo wide receiver 1 for Titans.
Denny is.
All right, well, Denny, you've already written that one, so of course there's going to be a blurb.
It's pre-filed, like an obituary for a president. It's pre-filed.
It is coming. Unfortunately, no more of the show is coming because it's over. But 2 episodes next week. Only 1 episode this holiday week, so you will not find us on Thursday, July 3rd. We will be back on Tuesday, July 8th. I'm not sure if I'll be there. I'm on vacation next week, but I might still try to join for a show. So we're sorry. We're only 1 episode this week, but we're happy. We'll be 2 next week. We hope you have a happy and safe 4th of July weekend. So for Denny Carter, for Kyle Dvorchak, I'm Patrick Daugherty. Thank you so much for listening. Check out our team preview series on rotoworld.com.